There are some games that like to take risks or just experiment and have fun instead of sticking to the usual formulas. These are some of the best games that don't feel like anything else out there. What I mean is, whether it's mechanically, gameplay-wise, narratively, or through some like really bold decision the developers made, they break away from the standard playbook. So let's talk about them. I genuinely don't even know where to start with this one, because this is one of those games that when you bring it up to someone who played it, they just get this look on their face, like a knowing look, like yeah, that game, because there really is nothing else like it. And I think that's the thing that gets me the most about Noire. It came out in 2011, right? And we are sitting here however many years later, and nobody has really done what this game did. Nobody has really fully cracked that same thing open again, and that says a lot. That says a whole lot. So here's the deal. Noire is a Rockstar published game developed by Team Bondi, set in 1940s Los Angeles. And like on the surface, you go, okay, Rockstar, open world, 1940s, sounds like a vibe. And it absolutely is a vibe. But the reason this game is so unlike anything else, the reason we're even talking about it in this context, is the interrogation system. That is the heart of this game. That is the thing that makes Noire. And I want to get into that because I think a lot of people kind of gloss over just how insane that actually was, and still is. You play as Cole Phelps. He's a World War II veteran. He's come back from the Pacific. He joins the LAPD, and he's a straight arrow, right? Like almost aggressively so. He wants to do the right thing. He's rigid. He's proper. He's the kind of cop who shows up to a crime scene in a perfectly pressed suit and just immediately starts picking things apart. And the game kind of frames him as this almost idealistic, almost naive figure in this world that is very much not idealistic, because 1940s LA, man, the corruption, the dark underbelly, all of it. And Cole is kind of navigating through that while also dealing with his own baggage from the war that slowly starts to come out over the course of the game. And I'll say, the story goes places you absolutely do not see coming. Like, the back half of this game kind of flips everything on its head, and I genuinely did not see it coming the first time I played it, but I'll get back to that. So the structure of the game is you work your way through different desks at the LAPD. You start on patrol, and then you move up to traffic, and then homicide, and then vice, and then arson, and each desk is basically its own series of cases. And the cases on each desk kind of escalate and connect and build towards something bigger. And this is where the game just like completely has its own thing going on. Because each case, you show up to a crime scene and you investigate. You are literally walking around looking for clues. You find a clue, Cole crouches down, picks it up, looks at it, and like the controller kind of buzzes to tell you if there's more to examine. And there's this satisfying little like musical sting when you find everything. And then from your clues, you build out a picture of what happened. And then you bring suspects in for questioning. And this is it. Like, man, this is the thing. The interrogation system in this game used something called motion scan technology. And what that means is they put the actors in this rig with like 32 cameras around their face. 32 cameras! And captured every single micro expression, every little twitch, every little flicker behind the eyes. And then they put that into the game. And the result is these characters have the most realistic, most nuanced facial performances you have maybe ever seen in a video game. Still, to this day, like, people's faces in this game are genuinely more expressive and real than a lot of modern games coming out right now. It is wild. And the reason that matters is because the interrogation system asks you to read faces. So you're sitting across from a suspect or a witness, right? Cole asks them a question, they answer, and you have to decide, are they telling the truth? Are they being evasive and you want to push them? Or are you going to flat out call them a liar and present evidence to contradict them? And the game is asking you to look at their face and make that call. That's it. That's the mechanic. And it sounds simple, it is not simple. Because some of these performances are so good that you genuinely sit there going, wait, are they lying? Like, something's off, but am I sure enough to call them out? Because if you call someone a liar and you're wrong, Cole goes in too hard, he gets aggressive, the interrogation sours, and you can miss information. You can actually affect how a case goes based on how well you read people.
Gage. He's in the Chamber of Commerce. He's in with all those momsers. He blocked every proposal I ever put forward. Kike this and kike that.
The open world is also just genuinely beautiful for what it is. 1940s LA, and I mean, they absolutely nailed the aesthetic. The suits, the cars, the music on the radio in your car while you're driving to a crime scene, big band, jazz, all of it. The city just feels alive in this very specific stylized way. It's not a massive sandbox in the traditional GTA sense. Like, yeah, you can drive around, you can respond to street crimes that pop pop up on the radio, there are film reels and landmarks to find if you're into collectibles, but the open world is more like set dressing, right? It's a backdrop. It's there to make you feel like you're actually in this world, not necessarily to give you 100 hours of side content. And I think that's the right call for this game, because L.A. Noire is a story-driven, character-driven detective game. That's what it is. The open world serves that. It doesn't distract from it. Now look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this game is perfect, because it's not. The shooting sections, and there are shooting sections, there are car chases, physical altercations, action stuff, that stuff is the weakest part of the game. It's functional, it works, but coming from Rockstar's pedigree, like these are the people behind GTA and Red Dead, the gunplay feels a little stiff, a little dated, a little basic, compared to what you know they can do. And honestly, it kind of always slightly pulled me out of it when the game shifted into full action mode, because I just wanted to get back to the detective stuff. That's where my head was, that's where my heart was, and I think most people who love this game would say the exact same thing.
Get away! Lose him!
Give me something, Velasco, or I'll take you back to the cells and tell the whole station you're a child molester. How long do you think you'll last?
Okay, I hear you.
Pentiment? How do you pitch this to someone? Because on paper, it sounds like it could either be the most interesting thing you've ever heard, or you could immediately check out. And I think that's kind of the beauty of it, and also the challenge of it. But I'm here to tell you, if you give this game a real shot, if you sit down with it and you let it do its thing, Pentiment is genuinely one of the most remarkable, most singular experiences you can have in gaming right now. And I mean that. So let's set the stage. Pentiment is made by Obsidian Entertainment. Yes, that Obsidian. The Fallout New Vegas people, the Pillars of Eternity people, the Outer Worlds people. And I think what makes Pentiment so fascinating right out of the gate is that it is clearly a deeply personal passion project. Like, this is not a game made by committee. This is not a game where somebody in a boardroom looked at market trends and greenlit a concept. This is a game where the devs clearly had something he wanted to say, a world he wanted to build, a period of history he was genuinely obsessed with, and he just went and made it. And you can feel that in every single pixel of this thing. Every single word, every single frame. The game is set in 16th century Bavaria. We're talking 1518. We are right in the thick of the Protestant Reformation, right when Martin Luther is nailing things to doors and the whole religious and social fabric of Europe is starting to pull at the seams. And the setting is this small Bavarian town called Tassing and the Curacao Abbey sitting up on the hill above it. And you play as Andreas Mahler. Mahler literally means painter in German, who is this journeyman artist, this itinerant scholar who's been living and working in the Abbey scriptorium. He's been there for years at this point, illuminating manuscripts, working on this massive theological work that he's been tasked with. And he's just kind of embedded in this community. He knows the monks, he knows the townspeople, he's got relationships everywhere. He's caught between two worlds, the ecclesiastical world of the abbey and the peasant world of the town below. And he's a fascinating protagonist because he's not a hero in any traditional sense. He's just a person, a complicated, flawed, intellectually curious person stuck in the middle of something much bigger than himself. And what kicks off the plot is a murder. A nobleman is found dead in the abbey, and Andreas gets pulled into trying to figure out what happened. And I know, murder mystery, medieval setting, sounds like a familiar setup, but this game does something with that framework that is so much more layered and unexpected than you're ready for. Because this isn't really just a murder mystery, that's almost like the entry point, the hook to get you into something that's actually about so much more. It's about faith and doubt, it's about class and power, it's about who gets to write history and whose stories get told and whose get buried. It's about what it means to live in a community and what your choices ripple out and do to the people around you over time. And I mean over time literally, because this game spans about 25 years across 3 acts, and you watch this town and these characters age and change and live and die. And that is unlike almost anything else in gaming. And also, man, the art style, like an actual medieval manuscript. The whole game is rendered in this style that evokes the look of 15th and 16th century woodcuts and hand-illustrated books. The characters are these beautifully stylized figures that look like they literally stepped off the pages of a historical text. The environments are these gorgeous flat illustrations that feel like woodblock prints. And the text, and this is a text-heavy game, there is a lot of reading, the text actually changes style depending on who's speaking. Like monks have this beautiful calligraphy script, peasants and common folk have a rougher, more informal hand, scholars have their own specific style, and it makes every single line of dialogue feel like it belongs to a specific person in a specific world. It is one of the most cohesive, detailed, most intentional art directions I have ever seen in a game. There is nothing that feels out of place, nothing that feels like a shortcut. It all feels completely considered. Now, gameplay. And look, I want to be upfront about this because I think some people bounce off Pentiment for this reason. This is not an action game. There's no combat, there are no skill checks in the traditional RPG sense where you're rolling dice and things can fail. This is a narrative game, a story game. You are walking around, you are talking to people, you are reading, you are making choices. That is the gameplay. And at the beginning of the game, you actually build out Andreas's background, what he studied at university, where he's been, what his expertise is, and that shapes what information he has access to, what he notices, what he can bring up in conversation. Like if you studied theology heavily, you might pick up on something a monk says that has a specific doctrinal implication. If you focused on law, you might notice something about a property dispute that other people would miss. And it doesn't change the core story, but it changes the texture of your playthrough. It changes what Andreas is bringing to the table. And I thought that was such a smart, elegant way to handle character building without it feeling like a traditional RPG system. The choices though, and this is the big thing, the choices in this game carry real weight, like genuine, no takebacks, this is now the history of this town weight. Characters die, people's lives are affected by the decisions you make, and crucially, you will never have all the information, you will never be totally sure. In the first act, you have to make an accusation. You've been investigating, you've been gathering clues, you've been piecing things together, and then you have to point a finger at someone. And I genuinely sat there for probably 5 minutes just staring at the screen, because I wasn't sure. I had a strong suspicion, I had reasons, but I wasn't certain. And the game is designed that way on purpose, because it's reflecting something true about history, about how often in history the wrong person got blamed, how often guilt and innocence were determined not by truth, but by circumstance and bias and power. The game is also pretty short by some standards. You're probably looking at somewhere between 12 and 15 hours, depending on how much you explore and how much you read. And I think some people might hear that and go, oh, okay, that's it. But honestly, I think that's the exact right length for what this game is. It doesn't pad anything out. Every hour feels purposeful. I'll say this, Pentiment is not for everyone, and I don't mean that as a knock. I mean it genuinely. If you need action, if you need mechanical complexity, if sitting and reading dialogue for stretches is something that takes you out of it, this game is probably not your thing, and that's okay. But if you are the type of person who loves history, who loves a beautifully written story, who appreciates craft and intentionality in game design, who wants to play something that feels genuinely different from literally everything else on your shelf, just go get this. Beyond Two Souls is one of those games that I keep coming back to in my head because it's just so weird and different and honestly kind of divisive. This one is just fascinating to me because it does so many things that are like completely unlike anything else. So first off, let's talk about what this game even is, right? Because if you haven't played it, it's not really a traditional video game in the sense that like you're not running around shooting things or managing inventory or leveling up stats or anything like that. This is a Quantic Dream interactive drama game, which means it's essentially like you're playing through a movie. And I know that sounds like a knock, like, oh, it's a walking simulator, it's just QTEs, but like, hear me out, because there's actually a lot more to it than that. You play as Jodie Holmes, and by the way, one thing I think I want to mention, that this is a PS3 2013, so I don't know, but doesn't this look so good for the age? Like, the motion capture in this game, dude, for 2013, this was absolutely insane. Like, the facial animations, the performances, the way these characters move and emote, it was really ahead of its time. And even now, like, going back to it, it still holds up pretty damn well. You can see every little micro expression, every emotion, and it really sells the more dramatic emotional moments in the game.
Breath, Jodie.
It's just not fair! How come everyone can go and I can't?
But here's where Beyond gets really interesting and really unique. You're not just playing as Jodie, you're also playing as Aiden, who is this supernatural entity that's been connected to Jodie since birth. And this is the hook, man. This is what makes the game so different. Aiden is like this ghost, this spirit, this thing that can move through walls, possess people, interact with the environment in ways that Jodie can't. And the game lets you switch between controlling Jodie and controlling Aiden at almost any time, and you have to use both of them to solve problems, to get through situations, to survive. And the gameplay gameplay with Aiden is actually really cool. Like, you're floating around in this ethereal form, you can move through barriers, you can see the world from a completely different perspective, you can possess people and make them do things, sometimes good things, sometimes really dark things depending on your choices. You can interact with objects, move things around, protect Jodie, attack enemies. There's this whole push and pull dynamic between what Jodie can do physically and what Aiden can do supernaturally. And when the game leans into that, when it really explores that relationship and those mechanics, it's genuinely compelling. Now, the story structure is wild because it's completely non-linear. Like, the game jumps around Jodie's entire life from when she's a little kid all the way through her teens, her 20s, different periods of her life, and it's all out of order. You'll be playing a mission where Jodie is working for the CIA doing some crazy covert op, and in the next chapter you're playing as 8-year-old Jodie trying to deal with bullies at her birthday party. And at first, this can be really jarring and confusing, like, wait, what's happening? When is this? How does this connect? But as you play through it and the pieces start coming together, there's actually something really interesting about experiencing her life this way. You see the consequences of events before you see what caused them. You see Jodie at different stages dealing with trauma and growth and all this heavy stuff, and it creates this unique narrative experience. The story itself, man, it goes to some really interesting places. Like, you've got government conspiracy stuff, you've got Jodie being trained as an asset for the CIA, you've got supernatural horror elements when she's dealing with entities from the infraworld, which is like this realm where Aiden and other spirits come from. You've got deeply personal, emotional moments about family, about identity, about what it means to be different and isolated. There's a chapter where Jodie is homeless, living on the streets, and it's this incredibly somber, heavy experience where you're just trying to survive, find food, stay warm, help other people in similar situations. And in the next chapter might be this intense action sequence where you're infiltrating a Somali warlord's compound. The tonal shifts are huge, and I think that's part of what makes the game so divisive. Like, it doesn't really settle on one thing. It's a supernatural thriller, it's a personal drama, it's an action game, it's a horror game at times. It's all of these things mashed together, and depending on what you're looking for, that can either be really exciting and unpredictable, or it can feel disjointed and unfocused. I played through this game twice, once right when it came out in 2013, and then again a few years later when they released the remastered version. And both times I came away thinking like, yeah, this game is flawed, it's messy, it doesn't always nail what it's going for, but it's also really brave and ambitious and different. It's trying to do something that most games don't even attempt. It's using the medium of video games to tell a very specific kind of story about identity, connection, power, loss, and what it means to be human when you're fundamentally different from everyone else. Man, this is that game that I think doesn't get talked about enough, and it's weird because when it came out in 2016, it was like this big Xbox exclusive. Microsoft was pushing it hard, Remedy Entertainment was coming off of Alan Wake and Max Payne and all that, and people were hyped, but then the game came out and it kind of just existed for a bit and then faded away, you know? And I think that's a shame because Quantum Break is doing some really unique, ambitious stuff. So first off, this is a Remedy game, and if you've played any of their stuff, Max Payne, Alan Wake, Control, you know they have this very specific style. They love mixing genres, they love meta-narratives, they love weird supernatural stuff, and they absolutely love their cinematic presentation. And Quantum Break is like all of that turned up to 11, because this game isn't just trying to be cinematic, it literally has a TV show built into it, like actual live-action episodes that play between the acts of the game. And we'll get to that, because that's wild, but let me talk about the actual game part first. You play as Jack Joyce, and the setup is pretty straightforward sci-fi stuff. Jack's old friend, Paul Serene, has been working on this time machine experiment, and he brings Jack in to help with the demonstration. And of course, everything goes wrong, the machine malfunctions, time starts breaking down, and both Jack and Paul end up with time manipulation powers. But they're on opposite sides of this conflict because Paul has seen the future, he knows time is ending, and he's trying to control the situation through his massive corporation, Monarch Solutions. Meanwhile, Jack is just trying to survive and fix this mess and stop Paul from making everything worse. And right there, that's the hook of the game. Time is literally breaking down. You'll be walking through environments and you'll see these stutters, these glitches in reality, where objects are frozen mid-fall or repeating the same motion over and over, or entire sections of the world are just fracturing and splitting apart. The visual effect of this is genuinely incredible. Like, you'll see a building collapsing, but the debris is frozen in midair, suspended in this crystalline time fracture, and you can walk around it and see it from different angles. Or you'll be in an area where time is skipping and people are teleporting around, stuck in these loops. The art direction and the visual effects graphics work in this game is top tier, dude. It really sells this concept of time falling apart.
Oh, crap. Frozen again. She was right. About the fracture. About all of this.
Now the gameplay is third-person shooter stuff, but with time powers, and this is where the game gets really fun. Jack has multiple different time abilities, and they're all super satisfying to use. You've got time stop, where you can create this bubble that freezes everything inside it. Enemies, bullets, objects, and you can shoot into the bubble and all those bullets will just hang there suspended, and then when the bubble collapses, everything hits at once. It's so cool to freeze a group of enemies, pump a bunch of rounds into the bubble, and then watch them all get hit simultaneously. You've got time dash, which is basically like a quick teleport dodge. You can zip around the battlefield, get out of danger, reposition instantly. Feels great, it's super responsive, and once you get the hang of it, you're zipping around combat arenas like a maniac. Then there's time shield, which creates this protective bubble around you that slows down incoming fire, so bullets are crawling toward you and you can see them coming and react. And time blast, which is like this explosive wave that you can charge up and release to knock enemies back and do damage. The combat in Quantum Break, when it clicks, when you're combining all these powers together, moving through encounters fluidly, it feels amazing. You're stopping time, dashing behind enemies, blasting them, creating shields, and it all flows together in this really satisfying way. The game gives you these arena-style combat sections where you're fighting waves of Monarch troops, and you have to use the environment, use your powers creatively, manage your cooldowns, and it can get pretty intense. But look, the story and the presentation, this is where Quantum Break really goes for it. The narrative is super involved, super detailed, and it's told through multiple perspectives. You've got the main game where you're playing as Jack, experiencing his side of the story, but then between acts, the game switches perspective and you play as Paul Serene, and you have to make these big choices called junction points. These are like these pivotal moments where Paul has to decide the direction Monarch is going to take, and your choices here actually affect how the story unfolds, what enemies you fight, what environments you go through, what side characters live or die. And then, after each junction point, the game plays a live-action TV episode, like a full 20-25 minute episode with actors and sets and everything. These episodes focus on the Monarch side of things, on characters you don't play as in the game. Beth Wilder, who's this time traveler trying to help Jack, Liam Burke, who's head of Monarch security, Charlie Wincott, who's this tech guy, all these supporting characters. And the episodes show you what's happening behind the scenes, how Monarch is responding to Jack's actions, how these characters are dealing with the time crisis and their own moral dilemmas. And look, the TV show stuff is ambitious as hell, and I respect what they were trying to do, create this hybrid game TV experience where the two mediums complement each other. And sometimes it works, like you'll meet a character in the game briefly, and then in the episode you'll get their full backstory and motivations, and it adds depth. Or you'll see the consequences of your junction choices play out in the episodes, and that's genuinely cool.
In everything you've seen, do I stop before you?
Some people are gonna love that whole transmedia storytelling thing, but for me, especially on replays, it does let you skip the episodes if you want, but then you're missing context and story beats, so it's this weird catch. The actual narrative though, the time travel stuff, the conspiracy, the mystery of what's causing the time breakdown and how to fix it, I found it pretty compelling. Remedy does this thing where they fill their games with documents and emails and recordings you can find that flesh out the world and the lore, and Quantum Break has tons of that. Like you can find these quantum ripples, which are basically echoes of events, and when you interact with them, you see these ghostly flashbacks showing you what happened in that location. It's a cool environmental storytelling tool, and it really encourages exploration. I keep coming back to with Quantum Break is it's swinging for the fences. It's trying to do something different, something ambitious, blending game and TV, exploring time manipulation mechanics that feel genuinely unique, telling a complex sci-fi story with real production value and Hollywood actors. And even when it doesn't entirely nail everything it's going for, I respect the hell out of the attempt. This is a game that could only exist at a certain time, you know? Like Microsoft was throwing money at Xbox exclusives, Remedy had the creative freedom to try this weird hybrid experiment, and they went for it. And we don't really see games like this anymore. Everything is either huge open world games, or live service stuff, or safe sequels. Quantum Break is this standalone, self-contained, deeply weird sci-fi action game with a TV show built into it, and that's just inherently interesting. If you like Remedy's style, if you enjoyed Control or Alan Wake, you'll probably really dig Quantum Break because it's got that same DNA. Supernatural powers, complex narratives, lots of lore to dig through, strong presentation. If you're into time travel stories and you want to see a game really explore those mechanics and concepts, this is one of the best examples. And if you're just looking for something different, something that feels unique, even if it's flawed, Quantum Break is absolutely worth it giving a chance. Brutal Legend. So Brutal Legend came out in 2009. Like, this is one of those games where I feel like I have a responsibility to talk about it because I genuinely think it is one of the most misunderstood, most slept on, most unfairly forgotten games of its entire generation. And I think a big part of why it got slept on is because it was sold wrong. It was marketed wrong. People went in expecting one thing and got something else and bounced off of it. And that is a tragedy, because if you go into Brutal Legend knowing what it actually is and you are the right person for it, and you might be that person, you might absolutely be that person, this game is one of the most purely joyful, most creative, most lovingly crafted experiences you can have. It is a love letter, like a full, genuine, heartfelt love letter. And I'll explain what I mean by that. This is a game that is simultaneously an action game and an open world game and a real-time strategy game and a comedy and a rock opera. And I know that sounds like a mess. I know it sounds like someone just threw a bunch of genres in a blender, but in the hands of Tim Schafer, it somehow, miraculously, feels completely coherent. It feels like it could only ever have been exactly this, because every single piece of it comes from the same place. Every piece of it comes from a deep, genuine, almost overwhelming love of heavy metal. So let's get into it. You play as Eddie Riggs. Eddie Riggs is a roadie, like a heavy metal roadie. He's the best roadie in the world, actually, and he knows it, and he's kind of quietly miserable because the bands he works for now are all this terrible glam pop metal nonsense, and he is a man who truly believes in the power of real metal, old school metal, and he's just grinding away doing his job because it's all he knows. And through a sequence of events involving a stage collapse and a blood sacrifice to his belt buckle, look, just go with it, Eddie gets transported to this ancient world, this world that is literally built from heavy metal, like the landscape is made of the visual language of heavy metal album covers come to life. There are mountains that look like giant amplifiers, there are forests of giant guitar necks, there are rivers of fire, there are demons and warriors and creatures that look like they stepped directly off the artwork of a Black Sabbath or Iron Maiden record, and Eddie wakes up in the middle of it and goes, huh, and then he gets to work. The world itself, and this is something I think people don't fully appreciate about Brutal Legend, is one of the most creative, most meticulously designed open worlds in gaming. And it's not big in like a modern Ubisoft sense where it's big because they needed checkboxes. It's big because there is so much stuff to say about heavy metal and they needed the space to say it, because every single inch of this world is a reference. Every landmark, every enemy design, every piece of scenery is a nod to something. A band, an album cover, a lyric, a moment in metal history. And if you are a metal fan, if you have even a cursory knowledge of the genre, playing Brutal Legend is like, it's like walking through a museum that was built specifically for you. You round a corner and you see something and you go, oh, that's a reference to that album. Oh, that's based on that artwork. Oh, that enemy design is clearly inspired by that. And the density of that stuff is remarkable. And then there's the RTS element, and look, this is the thing. This is the thing that I think caught people off guard and divided opinion on this game, because about a third to a half of the game involves these stage battles, where you're essentially playing a real-time strategy game. You build a stage, the stage generates fans, which is your currency, you spend fans to summon different types of units, different soldier types, different vehicles, and you direct them in battle against an opposing army while also participating personally in the fight as Eddie, and the goal is to destroy the enemy stage. And I think the honest take on this is the RTS elements are not deep. Like, if you are a hardcore RTS player, if you live in StarCraft, this is not going to scratch that itch in the way you might want. The mechanics are relatively streamlined. This game deserved better than it got in 2009, it really did. But it's still here, it's still waiting, and if you've never played it, man, you are in for something. This is the kind of game that grabs you by the guts, rips out your expectations, and reshapes them into razor-sharp claws dripping with conspiracy and carnage. This thing came crashing out in June 2009, same summer as Infamous, which created this beautiful bloodbath of comparison and competition. Cole versus Alex, Lightning versus Biomass, Hero versus, well, something decidedly not heroic. And that's the beautiful brutality of Prototype, right? This isn't your typical power fantasy where you're saving civilians and kissing babies and protecting the innocent. No, dude, you are the infection. You are the apocalypse in a hoodie. You're Alex Mercer. Well, sort of. And you wake up on a morgue slab mid-autopsy with no memory, no morals, and absolutely no chill. Because here's the twisted truth, the sinister secret at the center of this whole mess. Alex Mercer is dead, having died in Penn Station after he released the virus that killed a whole hell of a lot of people. The thing walking around in Alex's skin, wearing his memories like a mask, that's the blacklight virus itself, sentient and searching, a walking weapon of mass destruction that thinks it's a man. And that existential horror, that identity crisis coded in crimson, that's what makes this game genuinely fascinating beneath all the brutal, bloody bombast. You're playing as something pretending to be someone, trying to piece together a past that isn't even yours, consuming conspirators and civilians alike just to understand what the hell happened. The consumption mechanic, man, that's the core, the cruel and creative heart of this whole experience. You grab someone, pull them close, and absorb them completely. Alex can consume others to regain health, absorbing their biomass entirely. Their body, their memories, their identity, all of it flows into you, fueling your powers, filling in the fractured fragments of the conspiracy. It's dark, it's disturbing, it's disgustingly satisfying, and you need to consume constantly, because biomass is your battery, your bread and butter, your biological bankroll. Every power you use, every wound you heal, every helicopter you hijack, it all costs biomass. So you're constantly hunting, constantly feeding, this parasitic predator prowling the panicked streets of Manhattan, transforming terrified soldiers and innocent bystanders into pure fuel. The powers themselves, dude, they're spectacular, savage, utterly over the top in the best way. You've got claws, these massive knife-like talons that can cleave through concrete and carve through tanks. The blade, a single sword-like appendage that's sharp enough to slice helicopters in half mid-flight. The whip fist, this telescoping tentacle of terror that you can use to grab enemies from distance, yank pilots out of choppers, or just sweep through crowds like a biological wrecking ball. Hammer fists transform your hands into these colossal, concrete-crushing clubs. Muscle mass amps up your already absurd strength to superhuman, super ridiculous levels where you're throwing tanks like toys. And my personal favorite, the shield and armor powers that let you plow through military blockades like butter, bullets bouncing off you while you're sprinting at speeds that would make the Flash flinch. The combat is chaotic, creative, completely unhinged. You're fighting the military, Blackwatch soldiers, marines, tanks, helicopters, all trying to contain you. And you're fighting the infected, zombified citizens, grotesque hunters that can match your moves, and these massive boss creatures that require real strategy to take down. And the beautiful thing is you can approach fights however you want. Because the movement in this game, the mobility, the madness of it, that's where Prototype really flies. You can sprint up any surface, buildings, bridges, billboards. You can leap across entire city blocks, cover crazy distances with a single charged jump. You can glide through the air, using momentum and madness to traverse Manhattan in ways that feel genuinely freeing and phenomenal. And the web of intrigue system is brilliant for this. You consume key targets, absorb their memories, and unlock these video clips, these narrative nodes that slowly, steadily reveal the bigger picture. You learn about Project Blacklight, about the real Alex Mercer, who was kind of a cold, callous bastard, honestly, about the biological warfare experiments, the cover-ups, the complicity, because Prototype isn't about being a hero or a villain, it's about being something in between, something undefined, something dangerous and desperate and deeply, darkly fascinating. It's a game that asks what you'd do with ultimate power, and answers immediately, probably a lot of awful things, and you'd enjoy every second. So yeah, Prototype. Born from the same studio that made the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, built to be bigger, bloodier, more brutal and biomechanical. It's ugly, it's violent, it's morally murky and mechanically messy, but it's also bold, brilliant in its brutality, unforgettable in its unapologetic embrace of chaos and consumption. If you want a game that lets you be genuinely gloriously destructive, if you appreciate dark stories about identity and evolution, if you're tired of games that pull their punches and want something that swings with savage strength, Prototype deserves your time, your attention, your biomass. Like, at some point, Shadow of the Colossus stopped being just a video game and became like a conversation piece, like a philosophical thing. Nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for what Shadow of the Colossus actually is. But okay, what is this game? So you play as this young man named Wander, and Wander has traveled to the ends of the earth, to this forbidden land, this vast, empty, ancient place, carrying the body of a girl named Mono. And he lays her on this altar in this massive stone temple, and this disembodied voice, this entity named Dorman, speaks to him from above. And Dorman tells him that the only way to bring Mono back to life is to find and destroy 16 colossi, these massive, ancient, dormant creatures scattered across this enormous, forbidden landscape. And Wander agrees. And that is the entire setup. That is the whole story going in. And then the game just lets you go. And here is the thing that I think breaks people's brains a little bit when they first realize it. There are no other enemies in this game. There are no towns, there are no NPCs to talk to, there are no side quests, no dungeons, no loot, no progression system in any traditional sense. The entire game, the whole thing, is just Wander, his horse aggro, this enormous open landscape, and 16 colossi to find and kill. That's it. That is literally the whole game. And somehow that is enough. That is more than enough. Because what Fumito Ueda understood, what makes this game so extraordinary, is that by stripping away everything, by removing every piece of conventional game design noise, what you're left with is pure feeling, pure atmosphere, pure encounter. And the encounters are unlike anything you've ever experienced. Because finding a Colossus, actually tracking one down, is its own whole thing. You go back to the temple, you hold up your sword in the light, and the light refracts and beams toward the direction of the next Colossus. And then you ride. You ride across this world on Aggro, your horse. And the world is just, it's enormous and empty and gorgeous and melancholy and ancient feeling. Like every inch of this landscape feels like something happened here a very long time ago and then everyone left. There are ruins everywhere, crumbling bridges, overgrown stone structures, dried up lake beds, forests, cliffs, deserts, all of it just sitting there, quiet and still. And then you find one. And man, the first time you find one of these things and it stands up and you realize the scale of what you were looking at, I don't care how many times you've seen screenshots or trailers, nothing prepares you for the actual moment. Because these things are massive. I mean, genuinely, jaw-droppingly, almost incomprehensibly massive. Like the first Colossus you encounter is already enormous and you go, okay, wow. And then later Colossi make the first one look modest. And the way you handle it is the mechanical genius of Shadow of the Colossus. Each Colossus is essentially a puzzle boss. There is no health bar to chip away at in a traditional sense. Instead, you have to figure out how to climb the Colossus, like physically climb it, grab onto its fur or its stone surfaces or whatever it's made of while it's moving and thrashing, and find the glowing sigils on its body, which are the weak points. And then you have to drive your sword into those sigils to deal damage. And that sounds maybe straightforward, but it is absolutely not, because every single Colossus is completely different. Different size, different shape, different behavior, different environment. Some are on land, some are in water, some fly. And figuring out how to even get on some of these things, figuring out the sequence of how to reach the weak points, that is the puzzle. And when you solve it, when you figure it out and you're hanging onto this massive creature's fur 50 feet in the air while it's swinging its head trying to throw you off, and you find the sigil and you raise your sword and you plunge it in, that feeling is indescribable. Like there is a physical, almost primal satisfaction to it that just does not exist anywhere else in gaming. This thing started as a Skyrim mod, and it was so damn good, so densely written and deeply weird that it won a National Writers Guild Award. Think about that for a second. A modification of someone else's game beat out actual professional writers. That's the kind of lightning in the bottle brilliance we're dealing with here. So here's the setup, and it's simple but sinister, elegant but evil. You're trapped in an ancient Roman city, underground, untouched by time, but definitely touched by something darker. And this place operates under one rule, one law, one lethal limitation. If one person sins, everyone dies. The golden rule. Break it, and every single soul in the city turns to gold. Frozen. Finished. A city of statues, shimmering and silent. And when that happens, when someone steals or lies or kills or commits any crime at all, boom, time resets. You loop back to the beginning of the day, Groundhog Day style, but with way higher stakes and way better dialogue. You keep your knowledge, your items, your progression, but everyone else, they reset. Fresh slate, no memory of the massacre, which means you become this walking encyclopedia of secrets, this temporal detective, this chronological Columbo piecing together puzzles across multiple timelines. And dude, the way this game handles the time loop mechanic is masterful. It's not tedious, it's not repetitive, it's revelatory. Each loop peels back layers, exposes new paths, opens locked doors you couldn't reach before. You're not repeating the same day, you're remixing it, reconstructing it, rewriting it. The city itself is this claustrophobic masterpiece of marble and mystery. 23 characters, give or take, each one distinct, each one damaged in their own delicious way. You've got Galerius, the magistrate, trying to maintain order in a place where order is ordained by otherworldly oversight. You've got Sentius, the slippery slumlord who's clearly hiding something sinister beneath his smiles. Decius, the drunk. Opius, the healer. Aquisha, the priestess. Every single person has secrets stacked on secrets, lies layered over lies. And here's where the game gets gorgeous. The gameplay isn't about combat or quick reflexes or twitchy trigger fingers. It's about conversation. It's about asking the right questions, reading between the lines, catching contradictions, connecting dots that don't seem connected at first. This is a detective game disguised as a philosophical thriller, disguised as a historical adventure. It's Knives Out meets Memento meets a really good episode of The Twilight Zone, all wrapped in Roman robes and rendered in Unreal Engine. The dialogue system is deceptively deep. You can't just button mash through conversations and expect to succeed. Say the wrong thing, push too hard, reveal knowledge you shouldn't have yet, and characters will shut down, refuse to talk to you for that entire loop. And in a game where information is the only currency that matters, losing access to a character because you ran your mouth is genuinely punishing in this subtle, smart way.
Count on you to figure out who's about to break the golden.
Arrived here, and you already know.
The game does have some action sequences, which honestly feel a bit out of place, but also add this weird variety that keeps things fresh. There's this one quest called Behind Closed Doors, where you venture into a sealed palace full of zombie-like creatures, and suddenly you're in survival horror mode, shooting golden arrows at skeletal sentries in dark hallways. It's jarring, but also kind of brilliant, because it breaks up the philosophical pontificating with pure primal panic. Now, the game isn't perfect, no game is, no art is, right? The facial animations can look a bit stiff, a bit uncanny valley at times. The combat sections, when they appear, feel clunky and awkward because this engine, this design philosophy, wasn't built for action. Characters sometimes take too long to turn around when you talk to them, which is a minor annoyance that adds up over multiple loops. But here's the thing, those flaws fade fast when the story sinks its teeth into you, when you're 3 loops deep and you've just figured out how to save someone who seemed doomed, when you realize you can exploit the time loop in creative ways, like stealing money, which triggers the reset, but keeping the money in the next loop, essentially using the apocalypse as a free shopping spree, when you meet the god pulling the strings and realize the final boss battle is a philosophical debate, a war of words, wisdom weaponized against divinity.
Arrived here, and you already know everyone and exactly what's about to happen to them. Salve, friend.
Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I have to be upfront about something right away because I think it's important context for everything I'm about to say. Going into this game, I was cautiously optimistic. So the game is developed by Machine Games, the Wolfenstein people. And right away, that pedigree tells you something because Machine Games knows how to build a first-person world. They know how to make a first-person game feel cinematic and grounded and tactile all at the same time. And they brought all of that to this. And the result is something that genuinely feels like playing an Indiana Jones movie, not a game inspired by Indiana Jones, not a game that kind of captures the vibe, an actual Indiana Jones movie that you are inside of, and that is a really hard thing to pull off, and they absolutely nailed it. The game is set in 1937, which puts it right between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, so we're in the sweet spot. Peak indie era. The world is on the brink, fascism is rising in Europe, and Indiana Jones is, as he always is, right in the middle of something he probably probably should have stayed out of, but absolutely could not help himself. The story kicks off at Marshall College, where Indy is a professor, and something gets stolen from the college that sets him off on this globe-trotting adventure. And I mean globe-trotting literally. You are going to Egypt, you're going to Vatican City, you're going to the Himalayas, you're going to Thailand. The scope of this game's locations is genuinely impressive, and each one feels completely distinct and fully realized. And the story itself, it involves this mystery around something called the Great Circle, this ancient alignment of sacred sites around the globe. And there are Nazis involved, obviously, because of course there are. And there's this villain, Emmerich Voss, who is this Austrian archaeologist, and he is a genuinely great antagonist. Like, he's got this quiet, intellectual menace to him that makes him feel like a real Indiana Jones movie villain. He's not cartoonish, he's not over the top. He's just deeply, methodically wrong in this very dangerous way. And the cat and mouse between him and Indy over the course of the game is really well done. Now, let's talk about how this game actually plays, because I think this is where it gets really interesting and really specific to why it belongs on a list like this. The Great Circle is a first-person game, and that is a choice that I think some people were skeptical about initially, because Indiana Jones is such a physical, cinematic character. Like, so much of what makes Indy cool is watching him, watching the whip, watching the physicality, watching the expressions, and making that first person seem like maybe you'd lose something. But what Machine Games understood is that first person actually puts you inside the experience in a way that third person couldn't. When you're in a tight corridor and there are guards everywhere and you're trying to sneak through and your heart is actually beating a little faster, that's first person doing something third person can't do. When you crack the whip and it wraps around something and you swing across a gap and the wind is in your face, that's first person. When you're in a fist fight and you're throwing haymakers and blocking and dirt's flying and it's chaotic and desperate, that is first person. And the fist fights in this game, man, the fist fights. Okay, so the combat in this game is really intentionally designed around the idea that Indy is not a superhero. He's not a trained killer. He's an archaeologist who is really good at improvising and really good at not dying. And the game reflects that. You can use your fists, you can use your whip, and you can pick up and use environmental objects, and there are a ton of them. Like, you can grab a frying pan, a bottle, a shovel, a fish, literally a fish, to fight with. And the melee combat has this very specific, weighty, scrappy feel to it. Like, Indy doesn't move like a fighter. He moves like a guy who's been in too many bar fights and figured out how to survive them. And there's a focus system where you can line up a really satisfying punch that has this incredible, impactful feel to it. And the sound design on the combat is just, it's so good. Every punch lands with this meaty thwack. Every crack of the whip sounds exactly right. It feels like a 1930s adventure serial come to life, and it rules. But here's the thing, and this is important. The game actively encourages you not to fight. Like, Indy is fragile. He gets hurt. He can't just wade into a room with 8 Nazis and punch his way through all of them without it going badly for him. The game wants you to think. It wants you to sneak, to observe, to use the environment, to find creative solutions. And when you do engage in combat, the game wants it to feel like a last resort or a calculated choice, not a power fantasy. And I love that. I love that a game had the restraint and the design intelligence to build around the actual character rather than just making him a power fantasy action hero because the IP demanded it. The whip is also just, it's so satisfying. You can use it to swing across gaps, you can use it to pull objects toward you or out of enemy hands, you can use it to trip people, you can use it to interact with the environment in all these clever ways, and it never gets old. Like, I was 30 hours into this game and cracking that whip still felt good every single time. That's good game design right there. And speaking of 30 hours, the game is big, like genuinely substantial. Each major location is this large, semi-open environment with a central main objective, but absolutely stuffed with side content, with archaeological puzzles, with hidden tombs to find, with collectibles and artifacts and documents that flesh out the world. And the archaeological puzzle stuff is genuinely great. Like, you'll find an ancient mechanism and you have to figure out how it works, how the pieces fit together, and Indy will mutter to himself as he works through it. Little comments, little deductions, and it makes you feel like you're in his head, like you're thinking alongside him. And when you figure it out, there's that same satisfaction that a good adventure game puzzle gives you, where it clicks and you go, yes, of course, how did I not see that immediately?
Nazi idiots. Almost this.
Now look, there are some things. The stealth system is functional, but it's not like stealth game stealth. Like, it's not Splinter Cell or Hitman level complexity. It works, it does what it needs to do, but if you go in expecting super deep stealth mechanics, you might find it a little basic. And occasionally the AI does some things that make you go, buddy, I am literally standing right here, but it never really broke the experience for me, because the game's strengths are so strong that the occasional AI quirk just kind of gets absorbed into the fun. And look, I know that there are people who are disappointed that this game isn't a balls-to-the-wall action shooter. Like, Machine Games made Wolfenstein. They know how to do run-and-gun Nazi killing, and some people were expecting that, but that's not what Indiana Jones is. Indiana Jones is about adventure, exploration, discovery, outsmarting your enemies, using your wits and your tools, and this game captures that spirit perfectly. This is not a game where you're mowing down hundreds of enemies with machine guns. This is a game where you're sneaking through ancient ruins, deciphering hieroglyphics, swinging across deadly traps, having scrappy fistfights with thugs, and uncovering world-shaking mysteries. It's paced more deliberately, it's more thoughtful, more focused on the journey and the atmosphere than on constant action, and I think that's exactly what it needed to be. I walked away from Indiana Jones and the Great Circle feeling like I had just experienced a proper Indiana Jones adventure. Like, this is the game fans of the franchise have been waiting for. It honors the source material, it understands what makes Indiana Jones special, and it translates that into a video game in a way that feels authentic and immersive and fun.
I've had run-ins with these guys before. Trust me.
So this game, the people who played it love it. They genuinely, deeply love it. And not enough people played it. And that is a problem I would very much like to help fix right now. And it is a sequel to The Darkness, which came out in 2007 and was developed by Starbreeze Studios. And the first game is also great, genuinely great, worth playing on its own terms. But The Darkness 2 is the one that I think really crystallized everything into something special. Something that just fully committed to what it was and executed it at a really high level. And what it was is one of the most viscerally satisfying, most narratively interesting, most stylistically bold first-person shooters of its entire era. And I think it got completely buried under the noise of 2012, which was just an absolutely stacked year for games, and that is genuinely unfortunate. So here's the setup. You play as Jackie Estacado. Jackie is the Don of the Franchetti crime family. He is a mob boss. Young, sharp, dangerous, trying to hold his organization together in a world that is constantly trying to tear it apart. And Jackie also happens to be the current wielder of the Darkness, this ancient primordial demonic entity that has been passed down through a bloodline for centuries. The Darkness lives inside Jackie. It gives him power, it gives him these incredible supernatural abilities, and it also talks to him, like, constantly. This sinister, seductive, deeply unsettling voice that whispers and goads and tempts. And the relationship between Jackie and the Darkness, this negotiation between his humanity and this thing inside him that is very much not human, is the core of everything this game is about thematically, and it is way more interesting than you might expect from what is ostensibly a game about a mob boss with demon arms. Now, the gameplay, because this is where The Darkness 2 does something that I genuinely think has not been replicated properly since, and it drives me a little crazy that nobody has really followed up on it. Because the core mechanical concept of this game is quad wielding. And I know that word gets thrown around, but let me actually explain what that means in this context, because it is wild. So you have two hands, normal hands. You can hold guns in those, standard first-person shooter stuff. But The Darkness gives Jackie these two massive demonic tentacle arms, the Darkness arms, that extend out from his back on either side, and you control all four simultaneously. Left trigger fires your left gun, right trigger fires your right gun, left bumper controls the left Darkness arm, right bumper controls the right Darkness arm. And the Darkness arms can do a lot, like a whole lot. You can use them to grab enemies and throw them. You can use them to pick up environmental objects like a dumpster, a car door, a wooden pallet, and use them as shields while you're still shooting with both hands. You can use the Darkness arms to impale enemies on environmental hazards. You can grab a live enemy and use them as a human shield while dual-wielding pistols around them. You can grab an enemy and let the Darkness just... And this is brutal, I want to warn you, this game is extremely violent. Let the Darkness devour their heart, which restores your health. And what all of this creates is this combat system that is just relentlessly, joyously chaotic in a way that feels completely unique, because at any given moment you are making 4 simultaneous decisions with 4 simultaneous inputs: left gun, left arm, right arm. And when it clicks, when you are in the middle of a firefight and you've got a guy pinned with the left arm and you're using him as a shield and shooting with your right hand and your left darkness arm just grabbed another enemy out of the air, it feels insane. The art style is also something I need to talk about because it is a massive part of why this game feels so distinct. The Darkness 2 uses a cel-shaded visual style that's directly inspired by the Top Cow comic books that the game is based on, and it is gorgeous. Like, it has this inky, high contrast, almost painted quality that makes everything look like a moving comic panel. Now look, I'm gonna be real with you. The Darkness 2 is short, like genuinely short. The main campaign is probably 6 to 8 hours, and in 2012 that was held against it pretty significantly. People felt like they weren't getting enough game for their money, and I understand that criticism on a pure value calculation level, but I'll say what I always say about games that are short and focused. 6 to 8 hours of this is better than 15 hours of something patterned and unfocused. I don't know if I can recommend it to everyone, but like, if you've ever played a military shooter and felt kind of weird about it, or you're interested in games that actually have something to say, this one is absolutely worth your time. And I'm gonna say up front, this game came out in 2012, so like, it's old, it looks dated, the gameplay is pretty standard third-person cover shooter stuff. But stick with me here, because what this game does narratively is just absolutely wild, and it's unlike anything else you're probably gonna play. So the setup is pretty straightforward, right? You play as Captain Martin Walker, and you're leading this 3-man Delta Force team into Dubai, and Dubai in this game has been absolutely decimated by these catastrophic sandstorms. Like, the entire city is buried in sand, skyscrapers are half covered, and it's this really unique, haunting visual aesthetic. Your mission is simple, it's a reconnaissance mission. You're going in to find out what happened to Colonel John Conrad and his battalion, the 33rd Infantry, who stayed behind to evacuate civilians and then just went dark, radio silence. So you're going in to find them, figure out what's going on, and get out. That's it, that's the mission. And for the first like hour, maybe hour and a half, the game plays exactly like you'd expect. It's a competent third-person shooter. You've got your standard cover mechanics, you duck behind walls, you pop out, you shoot guys, you command your 2 squad mates to flank or take out specific targets or toss grenades. The gunplay is fine. It's not groundbreaking, it's not bad, it's just solid. You know, you've got your assault rifles, your shotguns, your sniper rifles, all the standard military shooter stuff. And honestly, if you're coming into this just expecting a shooter, the mechanics are gonna feel pretty generic. Like, it's very clearly inspired by games like Gears of War with the cover system, or like the modern military shooters that were everywhere in the early 2010s. Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, all that stuff. But here's the thing, and this is where Spec Ops: The Line absolutely separates itself from every other military shooter. The game is deliberately designed to feel generic at first, because it's setting you up for what comes later. The game is doing this whole descent into madness narrative that just gets darker and darker and more messed up as you progress. And I'm trying not to spoil too much here, but like, the game starts questioning you, questioning your actions, questioning why you're even playing this game and doing these things. There's this moment, and anyone who's played this game knows exactly what I'm talking about, the white phosphorus scene. And I'm not going to describe it in detail because experiencing it yourself is important, but it's one of those moments in gaming that just like, it stopped me cold. Like, I put the controller down for a minute after. The game forces you into a situation where you think you're doing the right thing, you think you're being the hero like you are in every other military shooter, and then it shows you the consequences of your actions in this really visceral, really uncomfortable way. And the thing is, the game doesn't give you a choice to avoid it. You have to do it to progress. And that's the point. The game is commenting on the fact that in these military shooters, you just follow orders. You just do what the game tells you to do and you never question it.
Let's just keep moving.
Also, the voice acting in this game is exceptional. Nolan North, who voices Captain Walker, does an incredible job. And if you know Nolan North, you know him as Nathan Drake from Uncharted, this charming, quippy hero character. But in this game, he starts off as your standard gruff military commander, and as the game progresses and Walker descends further into this moral darkness, you can hear it in his voice. He gets more desperate, more unhinged, more violent. The way he gives commands to his guys changes. Early on, he's tactical, he's professional. By the end, he's screaming at his guys skies, he's executing enemies in brutal ways, and Nolan North sells every second of it. I think the game is probably like 6 to 8 hours long, depending on how much you explore and how quickly you move through combat encounters. It's not a long game, but honestly, I don't think it needs to be longer. The pacing is pretty tight, and by the end, you're exhausted emotionally.
1. This is Captain Martin Walker. 2. Requesting immediate evacuation of Dubai. 3. Survivors.
Death Stranding. This one is a whole thing. Like, this is not just a game I need to tell you about, this is almost like a conversation I need to have with you. Because Death Stranding is maybe the most divisive, most argued about, most passionately defended, and passionately criticized game of the last decade. And I have thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. And I think if you are the right person for this game, and you genuinely might be, it is going to be one of the most singular, most affecting, most unforgettable experiences you have ever had with a video game. And if you're not the right person for it, you're gonna put it down after 5 hours and go, I don't get it. What is this? And both of those outcomes are completely valid. But I want to try to explain why this game exists, what it is actually doing, and why it belongs on a list like this more than almost anything else. Because there is nothing, and I mean nothing, like Death Stranding. Nothing before it, nothing since it. It is completely alone in what it is. So Death Stranding is set in a future America that has been devastated by an event called the Death Stranding. And the Death Stranding has essentially torn apart the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And as a result, these creatures called BTs, beached things, these invisible, oil-black, ethereal entities from the other side now roam the landscape. And if a BT catches you and swallows you, it triggers a void out, a massive antimatter explosion that craters the earth. And on top of that, there's this phenomenon called timefall, rain that accelerates the aging of anything it touches. So the rain corrodes your equipment, it destroys roads and infrastructure, it ages you at an accelerated rate if you stand in it too long. And the result of all of this is that America has basically collapsed. Cities and settlements exist in isolation, underground or in sheltered bunkers, completely cut off from each other. There are no supply chains, no communication networks, no connection. America is fragmented and dying and alone. And you play as Sam Porter Bridges, played by Norman Reedus. And Sam is a porter, a courier. His entire job, his entire life is carrying cargo from place to place across this broken landscape. He walks, he carries stuff on his back, he delivers things. And he has this condition called dooms, which gives him a sensitivity to the world of the dead. And he also has this ability called repatriation, which means when he dies, he wakes back up. He comes back from the beach, this liminal space between life and death, and he can keep going. And early in the game, Sam gets conscripted, really kind of forced into it, by this organization called Bridges to go on this mission to reconnect America, to physically travel from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast and connect isolated settlements to this network called the Chiral Network, which would link them all together and rebuild some semblance of civilization. And the game is you doing that, walking across America and delivering things and connecting people. That is the game. And I know how that sounds. And this is exactly the moment where people check out. Walking simulator, delivery man simulator, boring. And look, I understand that reaction. I genuinely do. But here is what I need you to understand. Here is the thing that people who dismiss this game miss completely. The walking is the point. The delivery is the point. The act of carrying something across a hostile, broken, beautiful, dangerous landscape and getting it to someone on the other side, that is not a vehicle for something else. That is the something. That is the game. And what Kojima understood, what makes this design so radical and so specific and unlike anything else in gaming, is that by making the traversal the core loop, by making the journey the thing rather than a means to an end, he creates this experience that is meditative, intense, and physically engaging, and emotionally resonant in a way that nothing else in gaming achieves. But if any part of what I've described sounds even remotely interesting to you, if the idea of a meditative, atmospheric, thematically rich experience that asks you to find meaning and satisfaction in small acts of connection and perseverance sounds appealing, then Death Stranding might be one of the most important games you ever play. Before your eyes, the thing that makes this game so special, so unlike anything else, is the core mechanic. You play the entire game by blinking, like with your actual eyes. You use your webcam, it tracks your face, and when you blink in real life, that's your input. And I know that sounds gimmicky, I know that sounds like some weird tech demo thing, but the way this game uses that mechanic to tell this incredibly emotional story about life and death and regret is just absolutely beautiful. And I'm gonna try to talk about this without spoiling too much, because experiencing this game for yourself is really important. So the setup is, you play as this soul named Benjamin Bryn, and you've just died, and you meet this ferryman character who's basically rowing you across the river to the afterlife, and he needs to know your life story to present to the gatekeeper to determine where you're going to end up. So the entire game is you reliving your life from birth to death, and the ferryman is narrating and kind of guiding you through these memories. And the blinking mechanic, here's how it works and why it's so genius. When you're in a memory, as long as you keep your eyes open, you stay in that moment, but the second you blink, time moves forward. Sometimes it skips ahead a few seconds, sometimes it skips months or years, and you cannot control this. You cannot stop yourself from blinking. Like, you're going to blink eventually, that's just human biology, right? And the game knows this. The game is designed around the fact that you cannot hold your eyes open forever. So there are these moments, these beautiful, important moments in Benjamin's life, and you're trying so hard to keep your eyes open, to soak it all in, to stay in that moment just a little longer. Maybe it's your mom reading you a bedtime story, or it's a piano recital, or it's a moment with someone you love, and you're fighting against your own biology, you're fighting against blinking, and then you blink and the moment's gone. It's moved forward, you've missed something. And that feeling of loss, of time slipping away from you, no matter how hard you try to hold on to it, man, that's such a powerful metaphor for life itself. We can't stop time, we can't go back, we can only experience these moments as they happen and then they're gone.
That's a great idea.
I don't know what I'd do without old Benny. It's Chloe.
The game is only about 90 minutes long, maybe 2 hours if you really try to keep your eyes open and stretch out every moment. And honestly, that's the perfect length for what this game is trying to do. It's a short life, that's kind of the point. You go through Benjamin's entire life in less time than it takes to watch a movie, and that brevity just hits different, you know? It makes you think about your own life, about how fast time moves, about the moments you've missed or taken for granted. There are different types of scenes in the game. Sometimes you're in these moments where blinking just moves time forward naturally. You're a kid playing in your room, you blink, now you're a little older, playing with different toys, you blink again, now it's your birthday party. Other times you're in these more scripted moments where the game wants you to see something specific, so it won't advance until you've experienced that beat. I think this game is important because it does something with the medium of video games that you literally cannot do in any other medium. You can't make a movie where the audience's blinking affects the narrative. You can't do this in a book or a TV show. This only works as a video game, and that's so cool to me. It's one of those games that reminds me why I love this medium, why games can be so special when developers are willing to take risks and try something completely new.
To start from the very beginning, I need you to remember. And just try to enjoy it this time.
So, in this game, there is no action, no combat. There's no exploration in any traditional sense. You are watching a story unfold, and you are making choices that shape that story. That is the whole thing. Basically, it's a really tight and interesting narrative game that will keep you hooked once you get past the slideshow look of the game, which, yeah, I get it. It looks really jarring, but hear me out. As Dusk Falls does not look like a conventional video game. It looks like, okay, imagine a graphic novel, like a really beautifully illustrated, painterly graphic novel, and then imagine those panels very subtly animated, not fully animated like a cartoon, not static like a comic book, but something in between. Like the illustrations breathe, characters blink, shift slightly, the camera moves slowly across a panel, and it creates this effect that is almost like flipping through a really cinematic graphic novel in real time. Now, about the story. So the game opens in 1998, Arizona, and we are following two families whose paths are about to collide in this catastrophic, life-altering way. One family is just an ordinary family, like genuinely ordinary. They're in the middle of a move, they're dealing with their own quiet tensions and their own baggage, and they stop for the night at this roadside motel in the middle of nowhere, just trying to get from one place to another, just trying to get through the day. And then there's this other family, these brothers, who have just come from something that went very, very wrong, and they end up at the same motel, and things escalate fast. And what starts as this desperate, volatile, completely out of control situation becomes a full-blown hostage crisis, and the people caught in the middle middle, the ordinary family, the other guests, everyone stuck in that motel, their lives are never the same after that night. Not one of them. And that one night, that is just the beginning. Because here's the thing that makes As Dusk Falls so special and so unlike most things in this genre. The game spans 30 years. Like, it is structured across 6 episodes and it covers decades of these people's lives. And what it is actually about, what it is really deeply about underneath the hostage drama and the tension and all of that, is aftermath. The choice system is also... Okay, so As Dusk Falls handles choices in this really interesting way. You have these decision moments where you pick dialogue or actions, and the choices feel genuinely consequential in a way that I think a lot of games in this genre don't always deliver on. Like, choices matter here. People live and die based on what you decide. Relationships are formed or destroyed. Futures are opened or closed. And crucially, and this is something I really appreciated, the game does not always tell you what the right choice was. It doesn't give you a little indicator going, good job, correct decision, because there often isn't a correct decision. And the art style, look, I said I came around to it, and I did, but I want to be honest that it is a specific taste, and not everyone is going to immediately click with it. If the idea of a mostly static, illustrated visual novel style presentation is a deal breaker for you, then this game might be a tough sell, regardless of how good the story is. So go look up some footage first. Make sure the presentation is something you can get on board with, because the story absolutely deserves your attention, but the style is non-negotiable. It's fundamental to what this whole thing is.
Family means sacrifice.
This is one of those games that I went into not really knowing what to expect, and it just completely hooked me for like a week straight. I did multiple playthroughs, I saw different endings, I got invested in these characters, and I just kept thinking about it even when I wasn't playing. And the core concept is so cool. It's this procedurally generated road trip game set in this fictional authoritarian country called Petria in 1996. And you play as different teenagers who are trying to escape across the border to freedom. And every single run is different because of the way the game generates these encounters and weaves together this larger narrative. It's really unlike anything else I've played. So here's how it works. You start a new run and you're playing as a random teenager. The game generates their backstory, their reasons for leaving, how much money they have, how far they are from the border, and your goal is simple. Get to the border, cross it, escape. But the journey is like 500 kilometers or whatever, and you've got to hitchhike, take buses, walk, whatever you can do to move forward. And along the way, you have these encounters with this cast of recurring characters, and this is where the game gets really interesting. There are like 7 or 8 main characters that you'll meet throughout your runs, and each one has their own storyline, their own motivations, their own role in this larger political situation that's happening in Petria. The procedural generation is handled really cleverly, so when you're on the road and you need to get to the next location, the game will present you with options. Hitchhike with this person, take a bus, walk to that motel, whatever. And depending on what you choose, you'll get a different encounter. Maybe you hitchhike and you meet Sonia and John and they're trying to rob you, so you've got to navigate that situation. Or maybe you take the bus and there's a police checkpoint and you've got to hide your identity. Or maybe you end up at a motel and you meet this other character and have a completely different experience. And because it's procedurally generated, you can't predict what's going to happen. Each run feels fresh and different. The encounters themselves are really well written and varied. Sometimes they're tense and serious. You're hiding from the police, or you're helping someone escape danger, or you're making these moral choices about whether to help someone or look out for yourself. Other times they're lighter and more fun. You might play mini games like air hockey or throwing darts, or you're just having conversations and learning about these characters. The game does a really good job of balancing the heavier political themes with these moments of levity and human connection.
I'm gonna be honest with you. You're the worst camera person in the history of camera persons.
The art style is really charming. It's got this low poly, almost cel-shaded look with these bold colors and this kind of stylized aesthetic. It's not trying to be realistic at all, and I think that works in its favor. The character designs are distinctive, the environments have personality, and there's this whole 90s vibe to everything. The music, the fashion, the technology. You're using payphones, you're listening to mixtapes, there are references to the era, and the soundtrack is fantastic. It's got this indie rock alternative sound that just perfectly captures that 90s road trip feeling. There are specific songs that I still remember because they played during these memorable moments. And your choices throughout all of your playthroughs, they accumulate and they affect the ending. The game is tracking these different ideological meters like support for the regime, support for the revolution, support for voting and democracy. And depending on what choices you make across all your runs, you're pushing the country in different directions. And I think this is really cool from a narrative design perspective. Most games, your choices only matter for that one playthrough. But in Road 96, every single teenager you play as, every single single choice you make, it's all contributing to this larger story. Now, I will say the procedural generation can sometimes lead to repetition, like you might get the same encounter twice in a row across different runs, or you might keep running into the same character over and over when you're hoping to see someone else. And occasionally the randomness can create weird pacing issues, where you get a bunch of low-key encounters in a row and the momentum slows down. But for the most part, I found that the variety was good enough that it didn't feel too repetitive, especially because the characters' storylines are evolving. So even if you're in a similar scenario, the context is different.
You don't want to do that. Try something, Mr. President. If they do, I'll crush them once and for all.
Nothing is more important. But there are many others in Petra still looking for it.
Okay, I need a second here, because Kenshi is one of those games where I almost don't know where to begin, because everything I say about it is going to sound either completely insane or like I'm making it up, and I'm not making any of it up. Every single thing I'm about to tell you is real and actually in this game, and by the end of this, I think you're going to understand why Kenshi has this reputation, this incredibly specific, incredibly passionate, almost cult-like reputation among the people who have fallen into it, because falling into it is genuinely the right phrase. But like, I need to be really clear about that right out of the gate. When I say unlike anything else on this list, when I say unlike anything else in gaming, I mean it more literally for Kenshi than maybe any other game I could name, because the design philosophy behind Kenshi is so fundamentally different from how almost every other game is built that it almost requires you to unlearn certain things before you can really appreciate what it's doing. Let me start with what the world is, because the world of Kenshi is one of the most genuinely original, most unsettling, most fascinating settings in all of gaming, and I think it deserves some real attention. Kenshi takes place on this planet, not named, just a planet, that is essentially a post-apocalypse. Like, whatever catastrophe happened here happened so long ago that there is no memory of it anymore. There is no civilization rebuilding. There is no hopeful resistance. There is no prophecy or chosen one or arc of history bending toward redemption. There is just this world, this blasted, hostile, deeply strange world of desert and dust and ruined ancient technology and warring factions and things that want to eat you. And the factions are all genuinely weird and genuinely unsettling in this very specific way. Like, there are these skeleton people, ancient robots from whatever civilization came before, just walking around trying to exist. There are these religious zealots who believe that eating any kind of meat is an abomination. There are slavers. There are cannibals, like actual organized cannibal societies with their own culture and their own economy based on eating people. There are these warrior monks, there are bandits and outlaws and bounty hunters, and none of these factions are simply good or evil. They all exist in this morally gray, deeply uncomfortable world that feels like it was built by someone who read a lot of weird science fiction and then just let it all ferment in their brain for a decade. And you are dropped into this world with absolutely nothing. And I mean absolutely nothing. No tutorial, no quest marker, no opening cutscene explaining what's happening or who you are or what you're supposed to do, no main quest, no story in any conventional sense. You start with a character, maybe one character, maybe a small squad, depending on what starting scenario you picked, with almost no money, almost no skills, almost no equipment, and the game just goes. Here you are, good luck. And this is, okay, this is the thing. This is the thing that I think either immediately speaks to a certain type of person or immediately tells another type of person that this game is not for them. Because Kenshi has no goals it gives you. There is no objective. There is no end game the game is pointing you toward. The game is not trying to take you anywhere. You decide where you're going. You decide what you want. You decide who you want to be and what you want to build and what you want to do. And the world will absolutely, completely, mercilessly try to stop you from doing any of it. And when I say mercilessly, I want to be very specific about what I mean, because Kenshi is one of the hardest, most brutal, most genuinely punishing games I have ever played. Not in a Dark Souls kind of way, where the difficulty is designed and tuned, and there is always a path forward if you're skilled enough. No, Kenshi is brutal in this more chaotic, more realistic, more almost indifferent way. Like, the world is hard because it does not care about you at all. You are nobody. You are nothing. You are one tiny, insignificant person in a world that was here before you and will be here after you, and it operates according to its own logic completely regardless of whether that logic is convenient for you. Like, your first hours in Kenshi, you will get beaten up, probably a lot. Like, you might get attacked by bandits and get beaten half to death and left in the dirt, and then you have to drag yourself, literally. Your character will crawl on the ground if their legs are too damaged to walk, to safety, and then you have to let your wounds heal. And the healing in this game is real time. Like, you lie there and you heal, and while you're healing, maybe something else comes along and finds you, and maybe that's also bad, and maybe you get beaten up again, and you lie there again, and you think, okay, so that's how this works. The base building is also this whole enormous thing that opens up as you progress. You can find a location, and finding a good location is its own whole strategic consideration because different regions have different resources and different levels of danger, and you can build a base. And building a base in Kenshi is this deeply involved, deeply satisfying process of constructing buildings and setting up production chains and assigning your squad members to different jobs and managing food and water and power and defending against raids, because raids come. Now look, I have to be real with you because it would be dishonest not to be. Kenshi is rough. Like, technically, visually, in terms of user interface, it is rough. The graphics are not impressive by any modern standard. The animations can be janky. The UI is this dense, complicated, not particularly intuitive thing that takes actual time to learn. And none of it diminishes what this game is, because Kenshi is one of those rare cases where the rough edges are almost inseparable from the soul of the thing. Like, the jank and the weirdness and the occasional total absurdity are part of what makes it feel alive. Sifu is this kung fu action game that is brutally difficult, incredibly satisfying when you start to get good at it, and has this aging mechanic that is just so clever and unique that it completely changes how you approach the game. And I'm gonna say this up front, if you don't like difficult games, if you get frustrated easily, this might not be for you. But if you're willing to put in the time to learn the systems and master the combat, Sifu is one of the most rewarding action games I've played in years. So the setup is pretty straightforward. You play as this young kung fu student whose family, including your Sifu, your master, gets murdered by this group of assassins, and you survive, and you spend years training, and then you set out on this revenge quest to hunt down each of the 5 people responsible and kill them. Classic revenge story, right? Very Kill Bill, very Old Boy, very much in that tradition of martial arts revenge films. And the game is structured into 5 levels, each one ending with a boss fight against one of these assassins. The squats, the club, the museum, the towers, and the sanctuary. And you have to complete them in order, though you can replay earlier levels to try to do better. Now, here's where the game gets unique, the aging mechanic. You have this magical talisman that brings you back to life when you die, but every time you die, you age, and the amount you age depends on your death counter. So the first time you die in a run, you age 1 year. Die again, you age 2 more years. Die again, 3 more years. And this keeps going up, capping at 10 years per death. So if you keep dying over and over, you're going from like 20 years old to 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 to 70. And once you hit 70 and die one more time, that's it. Game over. You have to start the whole run over. And this creates this incredible tension because early on, you're going to die a lot. You're learning enemy patterns, you're figuring out the combat system, you're getting your ass handed to you. And every death makes you older, makes you closer to permanent death. But here's the clever part. As you age, your stats change. When you're young, you have more health, but you do less damage. As you get older, your health decreases, but your damage output increases. So there's this trade-off. Getting older makes you more fragile, but you hit harder. And you have to balance this throughout the entire run, deciding when it's worth it to die and age up versus when you need to restart because you've aged too much. The combat system, man, this is where Sifu absolutely shines. It's so fluid, so responsive, so satisfying when you get into the flow of it. It's kind of similar to games like Sekiro or the Batman Arkham games in that it's all about timing and rhythm, but it's got its own feel. You've got light attacks and heavy attacks that you can chain together into combos. You can dodge, you can parry, you can block, and you've got this structure meter that's basically like a posture system. Every time you hit an enemy or they hit you or you block an attack, structure builds up. And when their structure breaks, their they're stunned and vulnerable, and you can unleash these devastating takedown moves. The level design is really well done. Each of the 5 levels is pretty substantial, maybe 30 to 45 minutes if you're playing well, longer if you're dying a lot. And they're structured kind of like mini gauntlets, where you're fighting through waves of enemies, navigating through these environments, and reaching the boss at the end. The Squats is this apartment building where you're fighting through drug dealers. Now, the roguelike structure, here's how progression works. As you play through levels and fight enemies, you earn XP, and you can spend that XP to unlock new moves and abilities. Maybe you unlock a new combo, or a new dodge move, or a passive ability that gives you more health. But here's the catch. These unlocks are temporary at first. If you die and restart, you lose them, but if you unlock the same ability multiple times, it becomes permanent. So there's this progression system where you're slowly building up your permanent toolkit across multiple runs. So the strategy becomes trying to perfect the earlier levels so you can tackle the later levels at a younger age with more health. And this creates this really interesting risk-reward decision making. So the year is 1807. You work for an insurance company. You are an insurance adjuster. And a ship, the Obra Dinn, a merchant vessel that disappeared years ago with its entire crew, has just drifted back into port, empty. No survivors, no explanation, just this ghost ship that sailed back out of nowhere. And your job, your literal job, is to go aboard, figure out what happened to every single member of the crew, document everything, and submit your report to the insurance company. That is the assignment. That is your entire purpose in this world. And it sounds, I know, it sounds dry on paper. Insurance adjuster boards ghost ship. But what it actually is, in practice, is one of the most gripping, most intellectually engaging mystery experiences I have ever had in any medium. Not just in games, in any medium. Because here's the tool you have. You have a logbook, a beautiful, detailed, illustrated logbook that catalogs the ship's crew, the passengers, the officers, everyone who was aboard. And you have this pocket watch, this magical, impossible pocket watch that when you find a body or the remains of a body or the place where someone died and you open the watch, you are transported back to the exact moment of that person's death. You experience a frozen tableau, this perfectly still 3-dimensional diorama of the exact moment they died, and you can walk around it, examine it from every angle, take in every detail, and then you hear it. The last 60 seconds of their life play out in audio. Just audio, voices, sounds, the specific noises of that moment, and then the scene snaps back to frozen stillness, and you have to figure out who this person is, how they died, and who or what was responsible. And that is the entire game. That is the loop. Find remains, use the watch, experience the last moment, walk around the frozen scene and absorb every detail, listen to the voices and the sounds, and then go back to your logbook and try to piece together what you just witnessed. And it is, look, I'm going to use a word and I want you to take it seriously. It is intoxicating, like genuinely, properly intoxicating, because every single moment is a puzzle, and every single puzzle connects to every other puzzle, and slowly, painstakingly, gloriously, the full picture of what happened on the ship starts to come together. And what happened on the ship is, it is something. Like the full story of what befell the Obra Dinn is this sprawling, layered, deeply strange tale involving creatures and curses and mutiny and sacrifice and betrayal and things from the deep ocean that should not exist. And you piece it together not through cutscenes or exposition dumps or anyone telling you anything directly. You piece it together through evidence, through observation, through the frozen moments and the overheard voices and the illustrations in the logbook and the details on the ship itself. And when a piece clicks, when you go, oh, that's who that person is, and you flip to your logbook and you fill in their fate and the game confirms you got it right, that feeling is unlike almost anything else I have experienced in gaming. Like a genuine dopamine hit. Like your brain just goes, yes, correct, good, more of this immediately. And there are moments in this game where I had a theory and I was working through it and I was following the logic and I was checking it against everything I knew, and it all held up and I committed to it and the game confirmed it, and I said something out loud, like a genuine involuntary exclamation of satisfaction, because I figured it out. The difficulty is also really well calibrated in this specific, interesting way. Like the game does not hold your hand, it does not give you hints, it does not tell you when you're close or when you're wrong until you've committed to a full set of 3 fates that it thinks form a logical group. And even then, it only tells you how many of the 3 are correct, not which ones. So you have to keep narrowing it down, keep cross-referencing, keep going back to scenes you've already visited and looking at them with fresh eyes and new information. And there were moments where I was completely stumped. The art style is also, okay, this is another thing that is completely unlike anything else. Lucas Pope made this game look like an old Macintosh computer game, like a 1-bit dithered black and white aesthetic. And I know that sounds like an extremely limiting visual choice, and in the hands of anyone else it probably would be, but the way Pope uses light and shadow and dithering in this style, the way he creates depth and texture and detail within these constraints is genuinely masterful. The whole thing will take you somewhere between 8 and 15 hours depending on how methodical you are and how quickly things click for you. And I will say, do not look anything up. I know that can be tempting when you're stuck. I know the urge to just check one thing is real, but resist it. Resist it completely, because every answer you find on your own is worth 10 times more than an answer someone handed you. This game is designed to be solved. Every mystery has a solution. Every fate can be determined from the evidence available.
Keep rowing! Where is Let them go!
This is legitimately one of the most unique, most ambitious, most emotionally devastating games I've ever played. And it's also one of the hardest games to recommend because you kind of have to trust me when I say you need to stick with it, even when it feels like you're doing the same thing over again. Because this game doesn't reveal what it really is until you're like 20-30 hours in. And I know that sounds like a lot to ask, but I'm telling you, if you push through, if you see this game all the way to the end, and I mean the real end, not just the credits the first time they roll, you will experience something that will stay with you forever. So the setup is you're in this post-apocalyptic future where humanity has been driven off Earth by these alien machines, and humanity created these androids called Yorha to fight a proxy war against the machines. You play as 2B, this combat android, and you're partnered with 9S, this scanner android, and you're sent down to Earth to fight these machines and try to reclaim the planet for humanity. And the game is an action RPG made by Platinum Games, the same people who made Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising, so the combat is fluid and fast and incredibly satisfying. But here's the thing, and I'm going to try to talk about this without spoiling too much because going in somewhat blind is important. The game is structured into multiple routes, multiple playthroughs, and each one adds new context and new perspective and new story beats. The first playthrough, Route A, you play as 2B and you go through this story about fighting machines and uncovering mysteries about what's really happening on Earth. And you get to the end, you see credits, and you might think, okay, that's the game. But that's not the game. That's like a third of the game. Then Route B starts, and you're playing as 9S through the same events but from his perspective. And this is where some people bounce off the game because it feels like you're just replaying the same stuff. And I get it, I felt that way too at first. But Route B adds so much context and new information and these hacking mini-games that are completely different gameplay-wise. And you start to understand things you didn't understand in Route A. You see scenes that 2B didn't see. You learn things about the machines and the world that completely reframe everything. And then Route C starts, and this is where the game just goes absolutely insane. I'm not going to spoil what happens, but Route C is a continuation of the story, not a replay. It's new content, new perspectives, new characters become playable, and the story goes to places that are dark and philosophical and emotionally devastating. And from Route C, you can get multiple endings, ending C, ending D, and then ending E, which is the true ending. And ending E, man, I have never experienced anything like ending E in a video game. It's one of the most meta, most emotionally powerful endings I've ever seen. I don't want to spoil it, but it involves the community of players, and it's just incredible.
How is it going?
I am embarrassed.
Why is that?
The combat system is fantastic because it's Platinum Games, right? These are the people who know how to make action combat feel amazing. You've got light attacks and heavy attacks that you can combo together. You can dodge, and if you time your dodge perfectly right before an attack hits, you get this slow motion effect and you can counter. You can equip different weapons, swords, spears, gauntlets, combat bracers, and you can set 2 weapons at a time and switch between them mid-combo. So you might have a sword in one slot and a spear in another, and you're chaining attacks together, color, switching weapons, dodging, and it all flows beautifully. Now, one of the most unique things about Nier Automata is how it shifts genres constantly. Like most of the time, you're playing this third-person action RPG, running around, fighting enemies, doing quests, but then suddenly the camera shifts and you're in a side-scrolling section like a 2D platformer, or the camera pulls way back and you're in this top-down twin-stick shooter perspective, or you're in a hacking minigame with 9S that's basically a twin-stick bullet hell shooter. The game is constantly changing up how you play it, and it keeps things fresh and surprising. The side quests in this game are hit or miss. Some of them are really meaningful and add to the world building and the themes, like there are quests where you're helping machines who are trying to understand human concepts like love or family or art, and these quests are often sad and thought-provoking, and they make you question what it means to be alive, what consciousness is, all this heavy philosophical stuff. But then there are also side quests that are just fetch quests or kill quests that feel like padding, so it's a mixed bag. I'd recommend doing the side quests that seem interesting and skipping the ones that feel like busy work. The story and themes, man, this is where Nier Automata really shines. It's a game about consciousness and identity and what it means to be alive. You've got these androids who are programmed to serve humanity and fight for humanity, but they have emotions and desires and fears. And you've got these machines who were created by aliens to destroy humanity, but they're developing their own culture and their own understanding of the world. And the game asks these questions about whether artificial beings can have souls, whether they deserve to exist, what gives life meaning. There are some issues with the game. The graphics are kind of dated, it came out in 2017, and even then it wasn't pushing the boundaries visually. The textures can be muddy, the environments can feel a bit empty sometimes, there are occasional frame rate drops, especially on older hardware, the map system is not great, it's kind of vague and doesn't give you a lot of detail, and like I said, some of the side quests are boring fetch quests that don't add much. But none of that really matters when you consider what this game does well. The story, the characters, the music, the themes, the way it plays with video game conventions and structure, it's all so ambitious and so well executed. This is a game that respects your intelligence, that trusts you to engage with complex ideas, that doesn't talk down to you.
We're soldiers. We take pride in our service.